Hi, it's Marshall again with Charlie the Mic, and we're going to be talking about a different topic now. It's the Book of Abraham, and this is a little more difficult because it's Egyptian hieroglyphics, and most of us don't read Egyptian hieroglyphics. It's kind of like a foreign language, and so learning the language is not always easy, but I've been learning from different people, and one of my first books was a little dinky, thin book called The Mormon Papers by Robb. And it was printed by published by his wife after he died. And it was just a little thin one, and it introduced me to the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and I was always fascinated by hieroglyphics. So it's always been one of my topics that I'm interested in. When a new book comes out, I kind of like to grab that and take a look at it and read it. And because I don't know hieroglyphics very well, I have to read it 4, 5, 6, 10 times just to get the gist of what's going on. So what am I talking about, Marshall? Well, I get the triple combination here. They call it the triple because it has the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price in it. So it has all three of the LDS, typical LDS scriptures that they would consider scriptures. Now, obviously, they have the words in the modern day prophet and his apostles when they speak in conference. That's not bound in the three. So this is called a triple combination. When they add the Bible to it, it's called a quad for a quadruple combination. So they call it a quad. What I'm talking about now is the last scripture, the Pearl of Great Price. And so in this, I'll open it up and show you the table of contents. And it says sections from the Book of Moses. So the Book of Moses is the first. And then we have facsimile number 1, number 2, and number 3 in the Book of Abraham. And that's what I'm going to talk about. That's these pictures here on the wall, facsimiles. They call them facsimiles, okay? Because they're supposedly true to life drawings of the actual papyrus. And so then there's more books in the Pearl of Great Price, which we're not talking about this time. So that gives you an idea. This is in scripture, so it has to be true because it's from the true God. Now, when I first started studying it, I got Mormonism, Shadow or Reality from Sandra Tanner, actually through John L. Smith. And in that, there are sections on the papyrus, and then they've come out with a whole, book on the Egyptian papyrus called The Case Against Mormonism, Volume 3. So Volume 3 has the Egyptian papyrus, and it has the Egyptian alphabet and grammar book that Joe Smith made up so people could translate the Egyptian language and understand what it was saying. Now, when he made this Egyptian alphabet and grammar book, it was so important that they made multiple copies of it because they didn't want to lose this precious translational tool that Joseph was making for them. So there's quite a few different versions and copies and portions that people copied. So the Mormon Church has most of them now because they can afford to buy them. So they own those. And so that's Sandra and Gerald Tanner. Then another ex-Mormon expert is Michael Marquardt, and he has written the Joseph Smith Egyptian Papers, and he also includes the Joe Smith Egyptian Alphabet and Grammar book. And so he goes through it in detail. Michael Marquardt is really a studious expert on many topics, and this is one of his favorite topics. So I've talked to Michael a lot, including had him come and talk to our guys when we come down to Utah. Another one that you might end up seeing is one by Dr. Hugh Nibley. Now, I don't think he's alive anymore, but this is the message of the Joe Smith Papyrus. Now, Dr. Nibley was hired by the church to go study Egyptian papyrus and come up with an answer for the documents. They discovered the documents, and the church, it was donated to the church officially, but they bought them from the Metropolitan Museum in New York when they found them. And so they bought these pieces of papyrus to prove that the Pearl of Great Price was true. And they didn't know how to read Egyptian either, so once they found out there were some problems, they tried to cover up. Now, another Mormon, Charles Larson, wrote this book here. He was allowed to go into the vault and actually copy with full color the Egyptian papyruses that papyri that the church owned. And in this book, and this came out about 1990 thereabouts, in this book is a full fold out, and I'll see if I can't hold this up so you can see it. It's a full fold out, and this is the Book of Abraham papyrus, and the other side is the Book of Joseph Papyrus. Now, the Book of Joseph Papyrus has red rubrics, it's red lettering on it. And so the church, when they first got these, they published it in black and white and then colorized it. So you couldn't see the red. The red was, they made it black. So no one recognized it immediately as the Book of Joseph, but other people had said that it had red rubrics on it. And so once they discovered the color red, it was obvious it was a Book of Joseph. So those are the two papyruses. I've read this book probably close to 10 or 12 times through. Every time I read it through, I seem to learn something new. It's easily readable, but because we don't understand Egyptian, you have to read it over and over again, and you keep picking up stuff. So I wanted to know the Egyptian translations, the Egyptian meanings of these papyruses, and so I purchased a lot of books and read a lot on it. So that's that book. The next one is, and that one was out for a long time. This one is I guess you'd say the nail in the coffin for Mormonism right here. This is the Joseph Smith Egyptian Papyri, a complete edition by Robert Rittner. Now, I've talked to Robert on the phone, and he actually went through and translated even the pieces that were broken. Joseph would patch little pieces in from the broken pieces that fell off of the papyrus because it's now fragile. And so he would paste them in upside down, backwards, all kinds of things. So he even looked at those things and translated the larger pieces of them and said, okay, this one's from that papyrus, that one's from this papyrus, and they got mixed up, so he didn't put them in the right place. So this is a complete edition by Robert Rittner. This is got full color pictures in it, just like this book here does. And then we have, it's been published so much now that the Mormon Church came out with their own edition of the Joe Smith Papyrus series, Revelations and Translations, Volume 4. So this is a facsimile edition, which this is the large edition. It's the most expensive one. You can get a paperback, smaller edition, those kind of things. But this one actually has full color pictures of the papyrus. And these are super well taken. The pictures are done with super professional photographers. And this is the Egyptian alphabet and grammar book in full color. Now, before this came out, we only had black and white of the Egyptian alphabet and grammar book, and that was from Sandra Tanner. So someone had snuck it out of the vault and gotten photocopies of it, and I gave a copy to Sandra. So we knew about the Egyptian alphabet and grammar book. We had copies of it, but the Mormon Church didn't admit too much to it until it was obvious that they couldn't deny it anymore. So they took a different approach. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, even up to about 2000, you could not get anything from the vault. The vault was sealed. They wouldn't let anybody get anything because it was damaging to the Mormon Church. Well, they took a different approach because things were getting snuck out of the vault, and people were finding them, and they had photocopies of the actual manuscripts and stuff like this that they didn't want out. So they've taken a different approach now, and they're publishing them like they were proud of them. So now they're proud of the errors. So now we don't have to look at really bad copies to find the errors. We can look at perfectly beautiful pictures of the errors. We can show the differences and the changes. So this is a really good addition. Now, you say, well, how do you really know what the Egyptians said? And Joseph Smith says one thing, and we find something totally different. Well, in 1835, when Joseph Smith got the papyrus originally, there wasn't any Americans that had translated Egyptian at all. There was a little bit of translation going on in France, but we didn't have internet back then. Nobody knew about it. So E.A. Wallace Budge, I think he's an Englishman, started, this is like his life work. He has tons and tons of books on how to translate the Egyptian papyrus. And he furthered the Egyptian translation better than anyone in the world at the time. So he is he's got books and books and books. I'm just showing you one of them. This is the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That's the larger version of this here. This is called the Book of Breathings. And so that gives you kind of an idea. I've taken the photocopies out of the triple combination, out of the Pearl of Great Price, and I've blown them up so we can actually look at them in detail here. And basically this is This one here is facsimile number 1, and you've got 2 people in facsimile number 1. You've got jars here with the internal organs of the dead person. You have a bird sitting here. You've got a table here. This is called a burial briar. You've got an alligator down here, a crocodile, and then this is like a edge of the river or maybe a lake or whatever. And the text actually talks about a Lake Khonsu, and this is one of the gods. These are actually gods, Egyptian gods, and this one's not. This one's actually the dead person. So we'll go through all this and look at what Joseph did. This one, number 1 and number 3, are from the same papyrus, and the papyrus is it's actually a resurrection document that actually the Egyptians used, and they believed that this resurrection document buried with the person would allow the person to be resurrected in the afterlife. And so this particular one is the very first thing that's going on. He is actually still dead. He's wrapped with the mummies here, and he's going to be resurrected. And so this is supposed to be Anubis resurrecting him from the dead. And then he goes through a judgment, and the judgment scene is not here. It's not on all of the Book of Breathings, but it's not in this one here. It may have been there, it may have gotten lost, we don't know. And then number 3, here's where he's presented to Osiris in the afterlife as being as passing the judgment and gets to go to eternal life, you might say. They would say the netherworld or whatever. They have their own words for it, but basically that's what it is. So I'm going to kind of translate all this into our modern American English and kind of give you ideas what's going on. So this is the basics here. The one I have up above here is the Book of Joseph, and I was talking about that on the back side, so I've taken that from this book here, by his own hand upon papyrus by Charles Larson, and I've blown it up about 200%, so you can actually see what's going on here. You can see all the different letters and everything. It's so small, it's hard to read, hard what's going on. And we'll see what's going on here versus what goes on here. And so one of the things that's important is this particular drawing here of one of the persons here in a boat is actually copied from this papyrus, which is from a different person. I think it's a woman, into this papyrus here, which is a hypocephalus, and there's supposed to be 3 boats here. So Joseph must have had a piece of a boat in here, and he just grabbed that one and stuck it in here, which is not. It doesn't apply. Just because you have 1 lamb you can't put 2 lambs in there. 1 lamb, you got to have the same thing. So it's not correct. There's a whole lot going on here that we'll get into, and this will be later on. But right now, we're going to talk about these 2 facsimiles, number 1 and number 3. We'll talk about the what Joe Smith says they are, and we'll talk about what they really are. And so that'll be our next section. What we're going to do is I'm going to read to you something that the Mormon Church is wondering about. They're trying to change things and they try to ignore things. But history of the church is very clear. Joseph Smith said he could translate Egyptian hieroglyphics, and everybody knew exactly what he said and what he meant. So we find in the beginning of the Book of Abraham, I'll show you the beginning page here that the church does, and it says right in the beginning, translated from the papyrus by Joseph Smith. What does that mean? It means translated by the papyrus, from the papyrus by Joseph Smith. And then it explains a little more about it. A translation of some ancient records that have fallen into our hands from the catacombs of Egypt, the writings of Abraham while he was in Egypt, called the Book of Abraham, written by his own hand upon papyrus. See History of the Church, Volume 2, page 235, 236, 348 through 351. So you're going to see that Joseph Smith was very clear. He could translate Egyptian hieroglyphics. Not only was he very clear about that, they knew exactly what he meant. The church is trying to deny this at times, at least maybe some of their apologists are trying to deny this at times, which is kind of ridiculous when you look at the history of the church and you look at it in context. It's exactly what Joseph meant. What else did he mean? Well, he meant it so much that he started writing an Egyptian alphabet and grammar book to show how to translate the Egyptian language. So that's a real problem when you say it wasn't a translation, it was some kind of inspiration. It's like lying to the public. So, do you want to be a member of a church that lies to the public about their scriptures? I don't want to be a member of that church. That would not be good. God's not going to lie about his scriptures. He's going to say, thus saith the Lord, and you know what? You better follow it because it's true. And you're not going to find out 6 years from now it's not true because God always speaks truth. So if we have a church that's speaking lies and trying to cover up, it should raise a red flag. You should figure this out. It's time for you to deal with God on this. I'm not your mediator. You figure it out. So going on. What is so good about the book of Abraham? Well, it's very difficult because who knows what these are? I mean, I wasn't raised in ancient Egypt, so I don't know what this stuff is. So, how do I read this? Now, I've changed the one on top here. This one here actually is the manuscript, okay? And it looks like it's this size. And this is what it looked like all wrapped up. I put a little piece of leather around it, but you can see there's pieces missing, okay? Well, you can see the pieces missing up in here. There's pieces missing. And the farther you get inside, the less is missing. And so that's why we believe this one here was in the inside when it was wrapped up, because most of what's here is correct. Whereas you get to this one over here, I'm sorry, this one's the most correct. This one's missing a whole lot. So I'm backwards on that. Number 3, back statement number 3 is most correct. There's hardly a mistake on the reconstruction or the restoration of it. This one here, the restoration is not so good at all. Same way with this one here. So we'll be talking about those things as we get there. Now, with the Book of Mormon, we have the Anton Transcript. And that's supposedly the transcript that Joseph Smith copied from the gold plates onto a piece of paper for, David Whitmer. And so David took it to 2 experts, supposedly in Chicago, and one was Dr. Anton. And so you'll notice this little replica that I bought in Salt Lake City of the gold plates with the 3-ringed gold rings has the Anton Transcript on it. It's all they have of the supposedly Reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics. And so the Anton Transcript, I have it on a t-shirt. You probably saw it earlier. And I use that when I witness to LDS people about that, because basically I see it as deformed English. It's you can see capital letter A's and all kinds of fancy changes to it, but pretty much easy to see. So there's that. And then we have what I call the closest to gold plates that you're ever going to get in your lifetime. So I got me a black 3-ring binder and I painted it gold. So what is the closest you're going to get to the gold plates in your lifetime? Well, that would be those original manuscript and the printer manuscript. So in this, I have photocopies of the original manuscripts that the church put in their magazines, like the Ensign magazine, things like that. So I see those in the white here first, and obviously they're not very good. And then I have the printer manuscript. Starts here at the yellow page, and it is a lot better, but still not as good as the ones that they've come out with today. So you can see different handwritings here in the printer manuscript. And so we can go to the actual, there's references at the top that the Reorganized Church put on that. And we can go to those top and we can find where the verses are. Obviously, the first reference is the Reorganized references of the Book of Mormon. And the second one is the LDS reference. So you have to look at that. But these came out. The history of this was that the Reorganized Church had the manuscript, the printer manuscript, David Whitmer's printer manuscript, and it went down through David Whitmer's family and was eventually sold to the Reorganized Church. And they had it, and it was starting to get in bad shape, so they decided to do a microfilm pictures of it. So they took pictures of it and did a microfilm of it, and then a Presbyterian pastor asked him to get a copy of it when he found out where it was at. And they said that they didn't loan it to people, but he could get an interlibrary loan. And so Wesley P. Walters got an interlibrary loan. He told me this himself on the phone. And that interlibrary loan came to his own library, and he went down there, and they said, well, we don't have a microfiche reader. You'll have to take this down to the print shop down there and actually make copies of it. So they wouldn't let him have it, but the local library did. So he took it down to the print shop, made copies of it, sent a copy to Sandra Tanner. She forgot where she got it, and I found out she had a copy, so I got a copy from her, and that's this copy here. And then I photocopied both sides like it would normally be done, and put it in this, and I was showing LDS people the manuscript that the printer used to set the type. Now, the Mormon Church today gives the printer a hard time and saying he was hostile to the Mormon Church, when actually he did put the commas and the punctuation periods and that kind of stuff in the Book of Mormon, the first printing of the Book of Mormon. And that's this one here. This is a photo reprint of the Book of Mormon by the Deseret Book. So the church actually printed it in their 150th year anniversary, 1980. And so they sold these. They're kind of rare now. And so they're absolutely facsimile, a photocopy of the original Book of Mormon. And so I bought cases of them because I was giving them away. Check it out. You know, this change over here, this change over there. So I had a great time with those. And so the question is, did the printer print in a manner that's honest? Was he an honest, reputable printer? And the answer is, he matches the manuscript when he prints with great detail. So I checked that out myself. So anyone who says, well, the printer is responsible for the errors, they're liars. They haven't checked it out. So I don't care if you don't know. If you still tell a lie, it's still a lie. So you need to find out. Now, that's the thing my Mormon friend told me. He said, Marshall, do you know if Mormonism's wrong? And I said, well, I believe it's wrong. He said, that's not good enough. You need to know for sure it's wrong or right. And, you know, the logic is, yes, I do. So these eyes right here have seen the manuscript. And when I talk to Mormons, I say, have your eyes seen the manuscript? Well, if your eyes haven't seen the manuscript, you don't know what you're talking about yet, because you haven't seen it with your own eyes. And it's possible to see with your own eyes. Now, I haven't seen the gold plates with my own eyes, so I don't know if it's a Reformed Egyptian or not. All I know is it's deformed English on the copy by Joseph Smith. So all I can say is I've seen the original. I've compared verses. I haven't compared every verse on every page. And I found lots of mistakes, and not by the printer. Mistakes that the Mormon Church doesn't like. In other words, the printer printed it right. So you can't blame somebody who did an honorable, honest job. And that's what they're doing. So you got that going on. These are things that if you've studied very much, you might know this as a LDS person, or as a, they call us anti-Mormons, really anti-Mormonism. So if you know that. So basically I'm talking about the Book of Mormon and its original parts. Now, how many people have a photocopy of the printer manuscript? Up until about 5 years ago, almost nobody. We scanned the whole thing, black and white, put it on a CD disc, and we're giving them away in Salt Lake City probably 10, 15 years ago. And then I gave one to Royal Skousen through another friend of mine. And when that happened, the Mormon Church came out with this particular volume here, volume 4. Where's that at? I took it in another room. And it has full color of the book of Abraham, and I mean, it's full color of the printer manuscript. So that's volume 2 and 3, I think. Yeah. So that's these two right here, volume 2 and 3. So you can actually see a really good copy. You can actually make out the letters. It's really nice. Whereas the black and white one wasn't quite so good, and you had to really strain to see the letters. And so that's basically a history of what's going on there. The Book of Mormon has problems, but this is harder to tell because we don't read Egyptian hieroglyphics. We can read the English in this, but how many people have the manuscript? Well, now it's possible to get one for $100, $150. You can get, well, it's probably more like $200 because you get 2 volumes. So you could actually get it. You could compare it if you're serious enough. Now, people say, well, you know, Marshall, you're really not that sincere. Well, hello, put your money where your mouth is, right? How sincere do you want to be when it comes to finding out the truth? I needed to know the truth for me, and I needed to know it deeply. So that's why I did these things. So we're going to talk next about the facsimile number 1 and number 3, and we'll show you why it's easy to use, even if you don't know very much Egyptian hieroglyphics. We're going to talk again about the Egyptian papyrus that Joe Smith said was the Book of Abraham. Now, because most people don't know how to read Egyptian, this is going to be a little difficult for all of us. So what I have done is I have spent, I don't know, 25 years or so looking at this, actually about 39, off and on. And I've come to recognize some of the words. Just like if you're starting to learn English, you recognize a few words, the, maybe, who knows, milk, easy words like that, potatoes or food or, table, chairs, things like that. So I've come to recognize some of the words, and I've yellowed some on this particular photograph. Now, this is a photograph of the actual scroll, and the scroll in his hands is this big. This is the actual size of the scroll. It's a photocopy of the scroll. I put it on cardboard, and so I could roll it up. And so I blew it up 150%, and I put that here shown as 150%. So we can actually look at it in more detail, because they were very good at writing small, and some of us have glasses, so it'd be nice to have big. So it's called the Sin text, or the Book of Breathings, and Sin is the sound that they use for the word breathings. So it's like, leche is milk in Spanish for the same milk. It still, tastes the same on the Mexican side as it does on the American side. So, milk is still milk, but in Mexico it's leche. In the United States, in English, it's milk. So same thing here. These little lines here with a little sail, sin, and it's like, wind or breathing, and the sail is like, it's getting the wind touching it, so it's pushing the sail, so it's called breathings. And what this particular part here is about the corpse starting to breathe again. And so that's the topic and the title and the, we don't really see a title, but it's the theme, you would say, throughout. So there's one here, sin there, another one over here, another one up there, another one there. So this section over here has quite a few. There's three of them in this one here. And then we have this facsimile number 1. Same thing that's over here. This is the restored one, restored by Joe Smith. So we need to talk about restoration. Was Joseph able to restore it the way it was originally? Well, that's not what he did. Now, originally, this particular character is Anubis, and everybody recognizes him easily by what he's doing here. This is a standard burial table. They call it a burial briar. And so this person here is buried. You can see the stripes on his body. He's been mummified. And now it's time for him to be resurrected. After he's been dead this long, it's time for him to be resurrected and get judged in the afterlife. So there's a judgment, much like Mormonism has, baptism for the dead. You can accept that kind of stuff in the afterlife. So here they are being resurrected. And who is it that resurrects him? It's Anubis. Now, I brought along a picture of Anubis, a drawing, so we can compare. This is what Anubis looks like. He's got dark skin, and he's got a jackal head. And there's a little statue of Anubis. So this should have a jackal head on it. And you notice Joseph Smith put the same head as the dead person on that jackal, on Anubis. So that's an incorrect restoration. There's no manuscript anywhere, no papyrus anywhere with a human head on Anubis. It doesn't exist because he's not a human head. So that's incorrect. That's one. And then in this section here, there's quite a few things missing, as you can see. And Joseph Smith draws in a head over here with a knife. And instead of putting a knife in the right hand, they put the knife in the left hand. So here's the knife in the left hand, which he's saying that this is Abraham, and that this priest Elkanah is killing Abraham. But of course, the person's already dead. It's kind of hard to stab a corpse and kill the corpse that's already dead. So the corpse, who is well named in the papyrus, and we'll talk about that in a minute, raises his hands as he starts to be resurrected. And he's going to have to take a breath, which is the Book of Breathings, tells you about breathing. So in this section here, in the vertical lines over here, we find the name right here of the corpse. So there's the name right next across from his head, and the name is Hor, justified. And here is his mother, Tikabite. And so, I'm sorry, that's his father. This is his father. His mother's over here, right here, Tikabite. And his father is Osiris. And so you've got his father, his mother, and his name in just this one papyrus here, in that section there. Now, there's a section missing over here that originally had this, and that's probably in the Chicago fire. We don't have any papyrus of this here. However, the rendition of it is so good, even though there's mistakes in it, the rendition is pretty darn good. We can figure out what's going on here, and there isn't much missing. Again, we have Anubis here. Notice the dark skin here, and you have Anubis here. So again, he's got a human head, evidently one little ear still sitting there, and so a jackal has an ear, but the nose must have busted off, and so he's got a human head there. The eye is very big compared to the size of the head, which if you had a nose on there, it would more look like a dog. So this is looking like a person again in Joe Smith's mind. Now, this person is the same dead person. His name is down here. So anyone reading Egyptian would know exactly who this person is if they were able to read Egyptian. If they weren't able to read Egyptian and they were from Egypt and they weren't legible, they couldn't read, they were illiterate, they would not know who this person is because they can't read his name. If you can't read his name, you don't know who he is. Why? Because he's specific to this particular papyrus. This is his death papyrus, okay, for him. And so it's much like what we're going to find. I made some pictures here that I thought I would share with you. So I'm going to share some pictures one at a time here. Let's just say that I know who this is, and I'm going to hold it up, and you know who this is too. If you're an American, you should know who this is. This is George Washington. Okay, so everybody knows this is George Washington. You just look at it and you say, if this isn't George Washington, you're crazy, Marshall. Because everybody knows George Washington. They recognize him immediately as soon as they see him. So now the next picture I want to hold up is Abraham Lincoln. And so this is Abraham Lincoln. Everybody knows this is Abraham. You just look at it and everybody knows, yep, that's Abraham Lincoln. We know Abraham Lincoln by sight because everybody knows who he is because we have American history. Okay? And then the next one would be Elvis Presley. We'll hold Elvis Presley up and you say, that looks like Elvis Presley because we've seen Elvis Presley before. And so that's Elvis Presley. Now, the next one I'm going to hold up is Winston Churchill. This is World War II. You know, he was England's, guy for World War II. That's Winston Churchill. And so you know these things because you recognize them. They're kind of icons. And the last guy is, well, second to last. This is Ronald Reagan. He's one of the presidents of the United States. We know Ronald Reagan because he's real famous. And then we have, of course, a really bad guy, Adolf Hitler. And so this is Adolf Hitler. Everybody recognizes him immediately. And so as much as these are icons that we would recognize in America, and we know exactly who they are immediately, the same thing happens here. All the other characters in these things here are easily recognized by Egyptians of the time. So just like the Egyptians would have recognized these characters, like we would recognize the pictures I showed you earlier and know if I was right or wrong, I'm going to show you two more pictures and I'll tell you who they are also. Now the first one I'm going to show you is Lucille Ball. And we call her Lucy, and I love Lucy, right? So there's Lucy right there. The next one I'm going to show you is Mother Teresa. And so you can see Mother Teresa and decide whether she's Catholic or not, or whether it's a real Mother Teresa or if I'm just spoofing you. So as easily as you recognize the people, you can tell whether I'm right or wrong. My point earlier to show you those earlier pictures was to show you that if I tell you the wrong name, then you're going, Marshall doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not the right person. You know, we know who Adolf Hitler is. We know who Elvis Presley is. We know who George Washington is. And Marshall's wrong when he gives us a wrong name for the pictures. So just as easily as you could tell I was wrong the first time and you can tell I'm right the second time is the same easiness that an Egyptian would know the figures on this Egyptian papyrus, okay? So I'm going to point out different people on the papyrus, and I'll point out their names that every Egyptian would know, okay? So as we go here, this would be Anubis. And this one here, they wouldn't know because it's the dead person. Then we're going to go to another one over here, and this is Osiris, and he's the head god. and his wife Isis behind him. And this is Ma'at. She escorts the dead person to Osiris to be for the final judgment. And this is Anubis again. So these are names everyone knows. They don't know this person here in this particular stela or facsimile, and they don't know this person here. Joseph didn't know these two people either. He didn't know any of the people. So he comes up with fictitious names. He calls this person Abraham over here, and that would be number 2. So when you look down at number 2, it says Abraham fastened upon the altar. It's not an altar. It's a burial briar. Okay? Over here, number 5, he says it's the same person, but he says it's Shulam, one of the king's principal waiters, as represented by the characters above his hand. Well, the characters above his hand actually have his name in there. Actually, his name is down here below his foot. And the characters above his hand is the name of Ma'at. So we don't have Joseph understanding how to read Egyptian at all. He makes mistakes everywhere he goes. Everything he is doing and saying is a mistake. So we look at number 3. He says number 3 is the idolatrous priest Elkanah attempting to offer up Abraham as a sacrifice. That's what the knife's doing in there. This is the only papyrus anywhere with a knife in it, because the knife is a portion of the missing papyrus. So Joseph restores the papyrus incorrectly. This hand up here, the second hand, is not a second hand in the papyrus. It's a bird wing. And so Isis is supposed to be flying above him, and he's supposed to be a type of Osiris. So this is one of his hands, and he's putting his hand up above his head like this. And so one of his hands is correct. He got the one hand correct. And then this bird here is his spirit. Now, the bird is supposed to have his head on it, not a bird head. So that part of the papyrus is missing with his head. And so Joseph put a bird head on it because he thought it was a bird. He had no idea this was the spirit of the dead person. This is Horus's spirit. So number 1, he says it's the angel of the Lord. So it doesn't matter what the characters are here. Joseph Smith calls them something else. So here in this case, the same dead person, Hor, we call him Horus or Hor. Number 2 there. Here he calls him Abraham. Over here, he is number 5, Shulam. So is he a prince or is he Abraham? And so here he is actually saying Abraham is sitting upon the Pharaoh's throne. Number 1, this is Osiris, not Abraham. So now he has Osiris being Abraham. Over here he has Hor being Abraham. So he doesn't even know it's not the same person. So that's that. When you look at the persons and just identify the persons, it seems like no one in the Mormon church wants to identify the people, because you have no excuse when you identify people. If you say that I am Lucille Ball, you have a problem. Okay? There's multiple problems here. I don't look quite as nice as she looks, just for beginning, and I don't have red hair. So there's a couple of problems going on there. So Joseph is making that kind of mistakes here, and it's really easy to see. So this is a simple way to show Mormons that Joseph Smith did not know what he's talking about. Now, if you want to go into each character, there is translations of each and every character on this papyrus done by different people. I mean, obviously, Hugh Nibley did a translation, which isn't that very good because he's not an Egyptologist of any score. But you get back to the Joseph Smith Egyptian Papyri, this book here by Robert Rittner. This book has everything translated. And so you can check these things out, find out what really is going on. So when Joseph says he's translating this as the Egyptians understood it, he's lying again, because the Egyptians have no clue about this being Abraham. They don't even know anything about Abraham at all at this point. Now they might know something, because this is like 1,000 years after Abraham died. So Joseph Smith is putting this 1,000 years older than what it is, plus or minus a few years there. So, as I said, Osiris he calls Abraham. Isis, Osiris's wife, he calls King Pharaoh, whose name is given in the characters above his head. Well, there's the characters above his head, and it doesn't say King Pharaoh, so he's wrong on that one there too. Number 3 is this little table here with a lotus flower on it. And he says, signifies Abraham in Egypt, referring to Abraham as given in the 9th number of the times and seasons, also as given in the first facsimile of this book. So he's saying this means Abraham, which is, of course it has no idea. Abraham doesn't exist anywhere on this papyrus. The word Abraham doesn't exist on the papyrus. It has nothing to do with Abraham. It has everything to do with the resurrection of Horus. And he's a priest of men. And so this is a burial resurrection document that when you have this made for you, supposedly it gets you through your judgment after death and your resurrection to eternal life, basically. So I'm saying that in American English rather than using their words. It means basically the same thing. So going on, we have the dead person. We've already covered that. Well, let's see, number 4, Ma'at. This is he calls Prince of Pharaoh, King of Egypt, as written above his hand. So that's this over here again, and that's a name, but it's not the one he's talking about. And I've studied that earlier, and I don't remember what it was. But number 5 is I've already covered that. Number 6 is Olimna, a slave belonging to the prince. Now he notices the black skin. You know, over here we have the same black skin here, and so he's calling this person Olimna, a slave belonging to the prince. So this, which one was the prince? That'd be number 4. Now, the problem with that being a prince is that's a female. So he's got females and males mixed up. This one here is a female also. He's got that as a male, King Pharaoh. So he doesn't know who the females and who the males are. Basically, I don't think he has any females in here. So he doesn't understand or even be able to read what's going on here. So Abraham is reasoning upon the principles of astronomy in the king's court. That's Abraham here this time instead of over here. So Joseph is confused about everything when it comes to names, when it comes to identity of people, has no idea who these guys are. If you had 3 books and they weren't the same, you know, I don't know if you got Mary Had the Little Lamb and you've got your math book and maybe you got a geography book. They're not the same, but you copy pieces out of each one and make it sound like it's the same story. It doesn't work so good. So that's what we got going on here. We talked about facsimile number 1 and facsimile number 3, and they're the same part of the Book of Breathings for a dead person who is the priest of men, and his name is Hor, H-O-R. And we call him Horus because Horus sounds kind of bad in our language, but that's actually the sound of his name, and it wasn't bad in his language. So going on, this hypocephalus, or facsimile number 2, what they call it, is something that we don't have a copy of. All we have is a drawing of it. This is a drawing of what they had. Obviously, there's some pieces missing here and pieces missing over here. So what I've done is I've taken a modern Book of Mormon, and I took out and drew around where the missing parts are. And so then I have this flap. And so I flap these over this way so you can see what portion of the hypocephalus that Joseph Smith actually had. And so his first job was to restore it. And so we have to look and see if the restoration is correct, and then he has to translate it. And then he's going to tell us what the topic is and what the purpose is, and then, of course, the date. He says is time of Abraham, so he's about 1,000 years off on the date. We know that already. So being that this is not here original, you know, it wasn't for quite a while that anyone knew that that was part missing. But eventually, in the back of one of his alphabet and grammar books was this drawing. And so the drawing helps us see what he had, and then he had to, you know, fix the drawing. So an interesting thing is people have told me many times, and I've read many books about the book of Joseph, which we had up earlier. In the book of Joseph, they said Joseph Smith talked about what was in it. He talked about a snake on legs, which we have snake on legs right there, and he says a perfect, example of a snake before the fall. And so he's got that. He talks about that. So he identifies the book of Joseph. And then this particular boat right here, he actually takes this and puts it into a hypocephalus. Now, there's supposed to be two boats here, and it's a different story altogether, a different deal, but he takes this one and puts it in here exactly. So it's, and then he translates this, so he's telling you what this is. And number 3 over here, when we look at number 3, he says, is made to represent God sitting on his throne, clothed with power and authority, with a crown of eternal light upon his head, representing also the grand keywords of the holy priesthood, as revealed to Adam in the Garden of Eden, and also to Seth, Noah, Melchizedek, Abraham, and to all whom the priesthood was revealed. So that's the translation of this box right here, of this boat with the actually Osiris on it. And so he's translating that from the book of Joseph as if it was part of this hypocephalus. So he actually does translate one piece of the book of Joseph officially in the book of Abraham. So he's taking the book of Joseph and putting it in the book of Abraham and then translating it as if it was the book of Abraham. So only when we came up with the papyrus could we discover what Joseph was doing. Before this, no one really knew what was happening. The other thing we see is I have this piece here now upside down, and so you're reading it upside down. So this one's right side up, this one's upside down. Now, why is that I have it upside down? Well, because Joseph couldn't read Egyptian hieroglyphics. Now, this is Egyptian Demotic. These are hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics are the pictures. And they actually write in picture writing. So these are hieroglyphics. But some of these other things, these are all hieroglyphics here. They're picture writings. These are in the outside here. This is hieroglyphics. These out here are called Demotic. And so, because I didn't name all this stuff, I'm just learning this as I go through and read stuff. So, Demotic characters. Now, this word right here and this word right here are not, it's not a whole word. So, this is the book of breathings here. This is not. This is the book of the dead. So, this is the book of breathings. Now, if I was to use the word breathings, now there's 3 characters in the book of breathings, and these are upside down right now. Of course, we're going backwards because, that we would be reading a normal way here, but it's upside down backwards now. So there are 2 characters here that sound like sin, S-I-N, sin and sin. So and then there's a sail, which would, be, breathings, wind, something like that. So that indicates that the sin is breathing. So it's called the book of breathings because a dead person doesn't breathe. So he's going to have to learn how to breathe again. He's going to start breathing. To become alive, he has to start breathing. So book of breathings is what they call it because of all the sins in here. And sins all over the place, talking about breathings or breath. So if I was to translate this and I didn't know what I was doing, there's 3 characters to breathings. Now, if I took one of those characters out, say the first one, breathe, then I'd have things. So breathings, right? Breathings. So if I didn't know that breathings took 3 characters and I only took 2 of those 3 characters, I would do something like this right here. What Joe Smith did was, Tichabite is the name of Hor's, this guy right here, Hor's mother. And we saw Tichabite, the name of it over here, right here. It's upside down. So he takes this, if you were looking right side up, he takes it up and puts it upside down here, and he puts kabite. So it's like things, breathings. You go things doesn't make any sense because it's only part of a word. So he goes kabite because he doesn't know that the word is Tichabite. And so he doesn't have the tick part of it, the first part of the word. So you've got things basically going on here. He's got the mom's name, but not all of it. And he's repeating it twice. So what is the significance of part of a name repeated twice? Nobody knows. So over here, he has the word breathings here in 14, but this is not the book of breathings. So it's like Mary had a little lamb, and you take a little lamb and you paste it into the Bible somewhere. It doesn't really fit. It's not the same thing. One's a poem, and it's not biblical. The other one's a Bible. So you can't just cut and paste. So he's got the word breathings in a hypocephalus. Now, the hypocephalus is not, the purpose of a hypocephalus is not to make you breathe. It's to put heat back into your head. So it goes underneath the head, hypocephalus, the head. And so it goes under the head, and it warms your head up, because a cold head is still dead. So you got to have a warm head to be alive. So the purpose of the hypocephalus is not to make you breathe, it's to warm your head up. So he's got something with the wrong purpose in here, upside down and backwards. You think Joseph knows how to read Egyptian hieroglyphics? Nobody that knows anything about Egyptian thinks Joseph knows anything. Matter of fact, he even missed the word the or this. He didn't get that right at all. He didn't get one word right in anything that he translated. So bottom line is, this is how much stuff he took out of this papyrus and this papyrus to fill in this papyrus. And these have nothing to do with each other. Now, this one has nothing to do with this one. This is for a totally different person. This is for a totally different person. This is a full book of the dead. And so there's somewhere in the neighborhood over 100 different, they call them spells or different, sections of it. This one here is a lot shorter, and it's just a, shorter version. Now, this particular person, Hor, the priest of men, he was pretty rich because he had both of them. And the book of the dead for Hor was discovered in France, in the Louvre Museum. And so they discovered it I don't know if, maybe 100 years ago or something, but they didn't really get the two people together. And they recently, maybe 10 years ago or so, discovered that this Hor and that Hor was the same Hor, because the mom's the same and the dad's the same names. So they have this particular individual, priest of men, he had both of them made for him. So Mr. Rittner, the guy that translates in the University of Chicago, he's actually told me he's commissioned to translate that whole book of the dead for Hor or Horus. And so he's working on that, I presume, today. So that was a few years ago I talked to him. So we will be getting another book, I'm sure, out about Hor or Horus and his lineage. And they dated this papyrus, a guy named Mark Cohen, I think is his name. He dated the papyrus looking at the lineages. Evidently, there's an awful lot of mummies out of this particular crypt they dug into, and the mummies are all related to each other. So there's more relations, and they were able to do a family tree, and they know the dates of some of them, so they were able to date this papyrus very, very accurately because of the genealogy, which it's unfortunate that Joseph Smith didn't figure out that there had some genealogy going on here. He could have clued in on that one. That'd be right down his alley. But he didn't know what he's doing, basically, so that's the whole point. These are upside down backwards. For the hypocephalus, you're supposed to be able to read the outside from the inside, all the way around like this until you get here, and then you have to read the outside from the outside because he's got them upside down and backwards. So that's that. Some of this reconstruction stuff is just bogus, and so he's just kind of, winging it. And that's basically what we have going on here. So I'd say at least a quarter of this hypocephalus is basically copied from somewhere else, which is not the way you should be restoring something. So if he doesn't restore it right, he certainly can't translate it right. So the translation, the restoration, all bogus for facsimile number 2 of the Book of Abraham. And so this has nothing to do with Abraham. This has nothing to do with Abraham, and this has nothing to do with Abraham. The names on these three are different names, different people. And Joseph doesn't know that. So you're taking things from someone else and putting it in this here. It's like saying, well, my uncle is Abraham Lincoln, when he's like 2 or 3 generations away and not related at all. So totally different, and so that's the problem with the facsimile number 2. So everyone wants to know, how do you use the Book of Abraham to witness with? And so I have a story for you. I don't remember the guy's name, but I was in Utah one year back about 1992, 93, something like that. And I made these things up, and I decided to take them to Manti, Utah at the Mormon Miracle Pageant and display them on the streets. And so I would unroll them and hold them up and talk to people. And I had a little chair and a desk there, and I taped them around the table. And I talked to quite a few Mormons because they were all interested. I mean, hey, Egyptian hieroglyphics, let's go talk to this guy. So it was a real popular topic. And, no one really, I mean, they would always talk to me, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I go, oh, yeah, really? Well, this is a problem here. And I didn't know as much as I did now. But, I would tell them problems of him copying things in here from other papyruses. And I'd show them the full color this big. So I had these two things here. And I had maybe one of these or something. And I was just doing this. So these are old. I've had them a long, long time. And so, I went away thinking that was really fun. I ought to do that again. But I always like to try something different. So the next year I tried something different. And then next year something different. And, I thought, I should try a lot of different things so that I don't just have one thing to talk about. I want to be able to talk about anything. A Mormon comes up to me and wants to talk, we're talking. We can talk. And I've had all kinds of different things. And I'll tell you a couple of stories about that. But anyway, I'm at the Manti. We've run into a family that got out of the Mormon church, not necessarily because of me, but, they invited us to stay at their house. And so we would put our tents in their yard. And one time I come down, it's close to the end of the time that Manti got canceled after a while. So I'm down there, and Wes says, hey, one of my best friends, he was a Mormon like me, and he came out. I talked to him and showed him what's going on. He came out of the Mormon church, went to the Christian church with me, and then he found the Truth Marshal and became a Freemason. And he says, I know you're an ex-Mason, so I'd like you to go talk to him. I said, well, you're here sometime. I said, great. My first night there. And so I said, call him on the phone. He says, no. I know you like to go down the first night and just wander around, talk to people and say hi and meet people. And I said, doesn't matter. Call him on the phone. He says, well, you might miss the first night. I said, God doesn't care what I miss or what I go to. God doesn't care what I'm doing. If I'm witnessing to a Mormon here, that's just as good as witnessing to one down there at the temple. So yeah, call him up. Really? Yeah, call him now. So he calls him. And guess what? He was available. So he came down to the house. We're sitting in the yard and we talked about what was going on. I was praying and going, Lord, should I start this conversation with this Mason, and tell him why Freemasonry is wrong? And I kept waiting for the Lord, and I said, okay, I guess you're telling me I need to start. So I opened my mouth and went, and he started. I'm going, that's interesting. I'm just ready to go. And he started. And I go, okay, well, shut up, Marshall. So I'm shutting up. And he's telling me, yeah, there was this guy many years ago down there on the streets of Utah, down in Manti. And I thought I'd go to Manti this year, one year. And so I went to Manti, and this guy was holding up this Book of Abraham thing. And I went over and said, yeah, it's ridiculous. You know what you're talking about? And he says, check it out. And he says, I said, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, check it out. So he says, I went home and, it was a while, probably 3 months later. I went down in the library because he said it's in the library. Go check it out. So I went down the library, checked it out. And as I'm reading, I'm realizing everything he said was true. And I realized, I can't get out of the Mormon church because I've got a job, wife, kids, all these things. So he said, I decided just to go inactive. I said, okay. So he said, I decided to go inactive. So I went inactive, and me and Wes were buddies. So eventually Wes talked me into going to the Christian church. So I went to the Christian church, and we had a great time together. We're best buds. And he says, then I found the Truth Marshal. And I found that Freemasonry was the truth. And so I joined Freemasonry. He says, now I have the truth. I said, so whatever happened to that guy on the street, that had that Book of Abraham thing? He says, I don't know. I looked for him every year and I never found him again. And I said, well, you just found him. I'm the only guy that's ever done that on the streets. The only guy. So you just found the guy. He goes, really? I go, yeah, you did. And I said, you remember how I was pretty direct to you and I told you how it was wrong? He goes, yeah. I said, for the same reason that I risked offending you then to help you come to know the truth, I'm going to risk offending you now and tell you that Freemasonry is wrong. And I'm going to tell you why it's wrong. And I went through the reasons why Freemasonry is wrong. It teaches you how to get to heaven without Jesus. You think that's possible? I mean, you do all these good things and everything. It has an oath of death, just like the Mormon. When you went in the Mormon temple, you took the oath of death, and it's the same oath of death I took in Freemasonry. So it has the same oath of death. And so it is just as wrong as Mormonism is. And you need to go back to Christianity because that's the Bible's what's true. And I talked to him. Now I've given you a shortened version. Talked to him the whole time that the pageant went on. And that's like 2.5 hours. And so when we got done, the pageant was done. We could hear the music, and it's like, you're kidding me. I missed the whole thing. But did I miss anything? Not a thing. It was an awesome story. And he got out of the Mormon church because I held this and this up at Manti in the streets, and I didn't know anyone ever got out. So you don't really know what's going to happen. And it's not my job to know. When I get to heaven, I'll find out. But in the meantime, if I witnessed, I've heard of one guy who witnessed and never knew anybody came out till he almost died. Right before he died, he found out there was tons of people that came out of the Mormon church and were pastors because of his witness in Christchurch, New Zealand. So I don't remember his name, but Ray Comfort talks about him. So anyway, all I'm saying is, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what God will do. He won't know how much of your mistakes he'll use for his glory. So go make mistakes. Go take the boldness and say, you know what, God, I'm going into uncharted territories. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to take the step of faith and go this direction. And if you want me to change directions, you lead me and I'll go where you want me to go. And that's the way you need to start to follow God and find out what God wants you to do. And I think the book of Abraham is a great choice for those who have been doing things for a while and you're looking for a little more depth, a little more, let's get some, I want to talk to the hardcore Mormons, okay? I mean, the wimpy Mormons don't care one little bit about this. So it's not really a witness for wimpy Mormons. It's a witness for the bishop, the stake president. It's a witness maybe for the hardcore missionaries. It's a witness for your best buddy who says, I know Mormonism's true, and there's nothing you can do about that. It's like, really? Well, did you know Joseph Smith copied things upside down and backwards? Did you know he copied stuff from a totally different person's stuff and onto somebody else's stuff, and it's upside down and backwards, and it's the wrong stuff, and it doesn't make any sense? Did you know that? No. Well, let's just go look at this. So I would recommend that you get Larson's book on it by his own hand upon papyrus. I'll hold it up again. This book here, you can get it from IRR. They've got lots of them, so you just write them or call them. And I call them. I usually buy cases of them because I like to give them away. By his own hand upon a papyrus. It'll be a good start. You'll get a really good basis of what's in there, and then. If you're having problems witnessing, you can always go with us to Salt Lake City and practice in the streets with me and those who like to go with me. So we try to go every year. I've been every year since 1985. I plan on going every year until I croak, So that's the way it works. So if you want to go, give me a call, 509-582-5627. It'll be a change in your life. Well, this is Marshall again with Charlie and... I have someone with me here.
Christy Darlington, Witnesses for Jesus.
And we were just talking about this, in the street thing. And come to find out, Christy and I were witnessing to the same Mormon. She was holding the other side of my brochures, I don't know if you call them overheads, but they're just examples. She was holding the other side as I'm witnessing to these guys. So she was just a young teenager then, and it's like, there's a guy over there with something exciting. Let's go do something, So, you never know who's going to help you. So she's going, that was the year I was there.
Yeah, we were doing holding the papyrus. He needed someone to hold the other side so he could describe all the things to this Mormon who was asking questions. So it was really cool.
So much fun. Yeah, it's so much fun talking to Mormons. I just love it. So if you haven't ever done it, you need to call us and get started because it's a blast. Anyway, there's another story.